I'm getting ready to turn down the sashes of a rectangle piece. I do this a little bit different than the square, which I did in one continuous stitch. You can do that if you want, but I'm going to recommend that you learn to sew this in 2 separate steps. The first thing I want to point out is although I can see the lines I drew for the stitch line here, I can't see them here. And that means that I'm going to have more trouble folding this than I would expect. So I'm going to trim this back. This doesn't always happen, but if it does, you probably want to remove the fabric that's in the fold line. This is going to be a fold line instead of a stitch line because we're going to fold the fabric on that line when we make our sash. To prepare to sew, I'm going to pin down this particular corner. So I'm going to fold the sash. This will not be a sash that I'm sewing, but I just want to start by folding it. This is going to be the bottom. This is going to be the top. So I'm going to fold that. I'm going to fold down the bottom. And then I'm going to fold what I consider to be the top along the stitching line, which now becomes the fold line. I'm going to hold that in place with a pin. After I've pinned that, I am going to pin this piece, this one sash down, and make sure that it looks like a nice right angle where this meets. I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to begin sewing at the tip down to the top, pivot, and go down the long edge. So I'm going to manipulate this piece before I put it under the needle of my sewing machine and get it looking as good as it can. As I approach this corner, I'm going to make sure that it makes sense with the other end of the sash that I'm turning. So sometimes you might have to nudge it up or down depending on what makes the most sense. I'm only going to sew down here and then I'm going to stop. I'm not going to sew back at this point. Now, if I did sew back, I just want to show you, if I planted my needle and pivot it at this point, the majority of the fabric on my table topper would be swung to the right of my needle, and that would put it near the neck of my sewing machine. This is the reason I sew down sashes in 2 separate steps. This rectangle has been stitched along this corner down this long edge. This corner's been stitched and this lower corner's been stitched, and now it's time to complete the sashes by sewing around this area to this corner. Because there are 2 sets of stitches on each corner of my rectangle, I'm going to start sewing here. When I start sewing there, I'm not going to pull my thread tails up like I normally do, because they can be behind the project as I work on it and they probably won't get tangled up. This is the row of stitching I completed on that last pass.